Is there not a job in London? The words escaped my lips in a whisper, barely audible over the deafening silence that filled the room. I stared at the email glowing on my laptop screen, my heart pounding as I scrolled through thread after thread, messages from Daniel to someone named Kate, each line unraveling months of carefully woven lies. Every word, every promise, nothing but deceit. Daniel didn't say a word. He stood motionless in our empty living room, the walls echoing with the ghosts of our plans. We had sold everything, our home, our memories, for this so-called new beginning. His silence was heavier than any confession. I'm Celine Harris, and until this very moment, I genuinely believed I was stepping into an exciting new chapter of my life in Minneapolis. For the past decade, I'd built a solid career as a financial analyst at Parker & Reed, climbing the ranks with determination and hard work. But when Daniel came home 3 months ago, his eyes sparkling with the thrill of an incredible job opportunity in London, I didn't hesitate. I supported him wholeheartedly, believing in our shared dream. Isn't that what partners do? They trust each other, even when trust is the very thing being shattered. The first house I ever owned, ours, was sold. I gave away pieces of furniture that I had meticulously selected. Daniel insisted that we go light, so I even sold the last item I had left of my grandmother, her antique mirror. I now knew why he had pressed me so hard to sell everything. How long? I inquired, my voice more steady now as amazement gave way to rage. How long have you been working with her to plan this? Daniel made an uncomfortable change. By the door, his eyes darted to his packed suitcase. How long, Celine? It took him 8 months to confess. Kate and I, it simply occurred. After that, the plan kind of changed, as if methodically ruining your wife's life was a natural process. The thought of how carefully they must have planned this, waiting until I had sold everything, made me feel nauseous. Turned all of our possessions into cash, took away all of the safety nets I had constructed. Isn't the money gone already? I inquired. However, I was already aware of the solution. Financial analysis is what I do. I ought to have noticed the warning flags. However, love blinds you, and I had fully trusted him. Daniel reached for his suitcase and added, "You'll land on your feet. You always do." I sensed a change in myself as he approached the door. There was one thing he was correct about. Every time I landed upright, and it would be the same this time. I unlocked my laptop and started typing as the door clicked behind him. And Daniel didn't know who he was up against. I first met Daniel at a financial technology conference in Minneapolis 6 years ago. I recall being struck by his ambition and energy. Despite working for a tiny company, he had lofty goals of being the best. I was unaware at the time that his ambition would eventually take over our marriage and everything else. In retrospect, I can see the red flags I ignored. He constantly seemed to take more than he gave, for example. I had recently gotten a big promotion at Parker & Reed when we initially got married. Daniel persuaded me to utilize my bonus to help him launch his own consulting business rather than celebrating my accomplishment. He had stated that it was an investment in our future. I trusted him. Although that was my first error, it was by no means my last. I provided him with emotional and financial assistance for years. I put in extra effort to keep us afloat when his first business failed. I took out a loan against my 401 to finance his next attempt. He vowed that each time would be different. I believed him every time. Last year, my cousin Nina made an attempt to warn me. During one of our coffee dates, Selene had remarked, "Don't you find it odd that Daniel never wants you to be involved in his business decisions? You work as a financial analyst, literally." Of course, I stood up for him. I had responded, "He doesn't want to burden me. In addition, he is my spouse. I have faith in him. Have faith." Now, what a stupid word that seems. Every symptom was present. He would answer late night calls in the garage. He was never able to fully explain the unexpected business excursions. He began pushing me to sell my possessions months ago, saying that we needed to make our lives simpler. After selling the house, I had about $400,000 in equity, plus an additional $200,000 from investments and retirement funds. As he recommended, all of it was converted to cash to facilitate the international transfer. Now it's all gone, moved to accounts I couldn't find. I don't miss the irony. My days are devoted to examining financial trends for multi-million-dollar companies, spotting irregularities, and stopping fraud. However, I was unable or unwilling to observe what was taking place in my own house. However, something hardened inside of me as I sat there in our empty rental house, surrounded only by crushed dreams and packed boxes. Even though I had previously been blind, my eyes were now wide open, and Daniel will wish he had never underestimated me after what I was about to accomplish. As I delved more into Daniel's email history, my hands began to shake. Every message exposed a new aspect of their plan. Kate was more than just Daniel's lover. She was a former customer who had assisted him in planning everything. For months, they had been plotting their getaway and painstakingly coerced me into selling off all of our possessions. The wife has no suspicions. 6 weeks prior, Daniel had sent her a letter. She is too preoccupied with organizing our made-up London existence to pay attention to anything else. I almost feel sorry for her. Nearly, my gut turned at the casualness of the word. With my analyst's mind in full swing, I printed everything. It was evident from their messages. They were establishing their new life in Austin while I was selling our house and ending my life in Minneapolis. Naturally, they had already used my money to purchase a home there. The deed, which was just 3 days old, was in Kate's name. It buzzed on my phone. Daniel texted, "I regret that this is how it ended. My lawyer has my signed divorce paperwork. This should be made quickly and neatly for the benefit of both of us, clean and fast. Similar like tearing off a bandage." I had nothing but packed boxes and an empty rental house that I couldn't afford after he had taken everything. With trembling palms, I dialed Parker and Reed. My supervisor, Linda, picked up on the second ring. My voice cracked as I said, "I need help. I am unable to attend the client meeting in London next month due to..." As London does not exist, the entire tale came out. After a lengthy silence, Linda finally said, "I want you to pay close attention, Celine. In addition to being immoral, Daniel and his accomplice committed criminal fraud. Now is the time to call the cops. Next, give your bank a call. Use the number of a reputable attorney that I texted you. And your job is safe, Celine. Take as much time as you require." The first tears started to fall down my cheeks. The first tears started to fall down my cheeks. The first tears started to fall down my cheeks. I'm relieved to have at least one anchor in my life, not depressed. A flurry of phone calls filled the following several hours: banks, lawyers, and police. Every discussion emphasized the seriousness of Daniel's actions. However, I was finally broke by a call from my bank. "I regret to inform you, Mrs. Harris, that you approved most of the transfers," the fraud agent remarked softly. "We are limited in what we can do because you voluntarily converted and relocated the assets." After hanging up, I surveyed the deserted house. I had purposefully left it bare for our new beginning, so it was empty. I saw my reflection in the glass in the last of the afternoon light. I hardly recognized myself. However, something changed in my eyes when I gazed at my reflection. I worked as a financial analyst with a focus on money trail tracing. Daniel had no awareness of my contacts, abilities, or expertise. He believed he had shattered me, yet he had just committed the greatest error of his life. And over the course of the following week, I transformed my cousin Nina's guest room into what appeared to be a detective's office. Printouts of bank statements, property records, email trails, and other documents were stacked on every wall. Daniel left a money trail, which I followed every night, staying up late. One morning, Nina brought me coffee and said, "You need to sleep." She gave my dark circles beneath my eyes a worried glance. "You cannot continue in this manner," I answered, looking at another bank statement. "I can't sleep. Not in Austin, where they're having a great time with my money." The biggest transfer, $380,000, had already been tracked by me. It had passed through 3 institutions before ending up in Kate's account. Their house was purchased with that money, which infuriated me. While I slept on an air mattress, they were most likely furnishing it with pricey furnishings at the moment. Everything became worse when my lawyer, Sarah Mitchell, called with an update. She clarified that the police are handling it as a civil case. "Given that you approved the transfers and there is proof that you were aware of the accounts," I interrupted him since he said they were for our move in London, for our alleged new life. "I understand," Sarah answered gently, "but it will be hard to prove fraud." She said, "And the paper trail demonstrates your consent are frequently the deciding factors in these cases." Feeling discouraged, I hung up. I made my first error that night. I gave Daniel a call. I responded, "You won't get away with this." He laughed, really laughed. "Get away with what? You voluntarily signed everything." "Celine, check the documents. After all, you are the financial expert." I said, "I'll fight this. I'll bring you before the judge." "How much money?" His tone was composed and assured. "Come on, Celine. It's finished. Proceed." I did something I hadn't yet permitted myself to do after he hung up. I totally lost it. All of the tension, rage, and embarrassment poured out. Nina discovered me sobbing while sitting on the floor with papers all around me. I muttered, I've lost everything. My retirement, my money, and my house. I've lost everything I've worked for. Nina took one of the bank statements and sat down next to me. Not everything, she firmly stated. You still have me and your abilities and intelligence. One thing she was correct about, I was still competent. And while I dried my eyes, a thought began to take shape. Professionally, I was still at the top of my game, but personally, Daniel had exploited me. I have access to advanced financial tracking technologies at Parker and Reed that were significantly more capable of tracking down money trails than individual bank searches. The following morning, I gave Linda a call. I need to take a few days off, I remarked. I also need a favor. I told Linda about my strategy, and she listened. There was a long silence when I was done. You know what you're requesting? At last, she said, it is against business policy to use company resources for personal use. I understand, I said softly. However, I am also aware of how many times my efforts have saved the business millions of dollars. I've never demanded anything in exchange. So far, one more pause. You are on vacation for 2 weeks. At last, she said. It's your business what you do at that moment. Simply, Celine, exercise caution. Additionally, avoid breaking any laws. For the first time in days, I felt energetic when I hung up. Daniel believed he had broken me and had triumphed, but a harsh lesson was about to be taught to him. A woman who knows how to track the money should never be taken lightly. It felt odd to use Parker and Reed's financial tracking program after work. However, I ignored my guilt. Money was no longer the only factor in this. Justice was at issue. Something surprising about Daniel and Kate's plan began to emerge from the programs I use on a regular basis to track down patterns of corporate fraud. I informed Nina over breakfast that they became careless. They made beginner blunders, but they believed they had hidden their tracks. What sort of errors? She leaned forward to inquire. In an attempt to cover up the trail, Kate has been transferring funds between accounts. However, she follows a schedule, sending money in fixed sums every 3 days. The software detected it right away. However, it wasn't the most significant discovery. I found something that made my heart race as I continued to dig. Through his consultancy business, Daniel and Kate had been operating a small-scale Ponzi scheme. Prior to focusing on me, they had scammed at least 6 other people. As I went over the evidence, I saw that my hands were shaking. Dates, sums, and names. Everything was there. They would persuade individuals to invest by using their charm, then show them fictitious returns for a few months before taking the money and running. They had other victims before me. Their biggest score to date was me. I gave Sarah a call right away. I explained, and she said, this changes everything. We are no longer considering a divorce case. We are examining investment fraud as well as wire fraud. Now, this is federal territory. However, I wasn't yet prepared to approach the authorities. I had another card to play first, and I needed more evidence. I contacted Marcus, a friend from college who was now employed at the bank where Kay had created her most recent account. I presented my findings over coffee. He looked over the papers and murmured, Jesus, Celine, this is serious business. Yeah, I said, I need your assistance because of this. It was like watching dominoes fall after that. Marcus reported suspicious activity on Kate's account. Just as they were closing on another investment property, this set off an automatic freeze. There was no better time to do it. After a few hours, a text message from an unidentified number appeared on my phone. What did you do? It was Kate displaying her initial panic attack. I didn't answer. Rather, I sent all of my proof to the other victims that I had located. They began to come forward one by one, each with a unique tale of treachery. That night, Linda gave me a call. Celine, the FBI has been in touch with us regarding certain strange transactions you pointed out in our database. I inhaled deeply. I can describe everything. No need, she said. I've already informed them that I gave you permission to use the program. They would like to see you tomorrow. I was sitting in Nina's guest room that evening, looking at the screen of my laptop. I had one more nuclear option at my disposal, which I had been putting off. Daniel had made a crucial error. Ever since he was in college, he had kept his email password the same. I entered a few keystrokes to access his account. All of their conversations with Kate, their plans, and their lies were all there. With my finger hovering over the forward button, I downloaded everything. I could email it all to his whole professional network with a single click. I reflected on how he had chuckled over the phone, so sure of his triumph. It's possible that the previous Celine would have hesitated and given pity. However, I had changed from the Celine of the past. I hit the transmit button. The reaction was terrible and swift. Daniel's career collapsed within hours of sending those emails. Documented evidence of his fraud scheme was provided to his clients, coworkers, and business partners. He finally broke his quiet, which must have been caused by his phone exploding with texts. He texted, "You have ruined me. Are you content now?" I felt nothing but icy resolve as I gazed at his letter. "I'm just getting started, Daniel." The following morning's FBI conference was tense. I carefully went over everything I had discovered with two agents while we sat in a sterile conference room. The pattern of deception against numerous victims seems to be of special interest to them. "What you've discovered here isn't just one isolated incident," Agent Roberts replied to Mrs. Harris. "This seems to be a well-organized criminal activity." I gave them my last piece of evidence, a thorough spreadsheet that documented each transaction, victim, and dollar. I clarified that they believed they could conceal their track, but if you know where to look, money always leaves its mark. Things took an unexpected turn at that point. A document was passed across the table by Agent Roberts. "For the past year, we have been keeping an eye on Kate, Miss Catherine Bennett. In 3 other states, she has participated in similar programs." My heart stopped beating. "What? Mrs. Harris? She's a professional scammer. Furthermore, it appears that your spouse was more than just her accomplice. She might have also been marked by him." The room began to swirl a little. I felt the agent's remarks strike me like a punch to the body. Was it possible to play Daniel too? Did Kate manipulate him in the same manner that they had me? But before I could come to terms with this realization, Marcus sent me an urgent message on my phone. "Kate is attempting to unblock the block accounts. She's currently making a scene at the bank." I quickly excused myself and gave Marcus a call. He clarified that she was threatening legal action, claims that she will sue the bank for improperly freezing her account. She is accompanied by a lawyer. I demanded that nothing be released. Now the FBI is engaged. Marcus remarked in a tight voice, "There's more." According to her, the funds were a valid business investment. "She has documents that bear your signature." My blood froze. Daniel gave me a stack of documents, ostensibly for our transfer to London, which I recalled signing. I maintained that their signatures were collected under fraudulent pretenses. That may be the case, but it creates legal complications. The FBI agents were getting ready to go. When I hurried back into the meeting room, I shouted out, "Kate is at Meridian Bank right now. She is attempting to get into the accounts." They looked at each other. Agent Roberts continued slowly, "Mrs. Harris, we need you to comprehend something. If you have done anything that might be construed as unlawful." I interrupted. "Everything I did was legal. All I did was follow the money. That's what I do." But I could feel a knot in my stomach as they rushed out. Had I overreached myself? Had I been careless in my thirst for vengeance? I took out my phone and dialed my attorney, Sarah. I noticed another text from Daniel as it rang. "You don't know what you've begun. Kate is not who you believe her to be. Now both of us are in jeopardy." I experienced a brief moment of fear for the first time since this started. In fact, what had I fallen into? I have to talk to Daniel. After a restless night of considering my alternatives, I came to this conclusion. I needed to know the whole extent of the situation if Kate was indeed who the FBI said she was. Nina said I was insane for ever thinking about it. She said he'll just manipulate you again. However, I had changed from the gullible lady who had put her blind faith in him. I made plans to meet Daniel in a coffee shop that was both public and crowded, close to Nina's house. I could scarcely recognize him when he entered. His normal air of confidence was gone. He appeared anxious and haunted. Without introducing himself, he slid into the seat opposite from me and muttered, "Kate's gone." Before the accounts were frozen, she deleted all she could access. "The house itself has been sold." "What is the sensation?" I asked icily. Being the one with nothing left, he set a USB disk on the table with shaking hands. I documented everything, every deal, every discussion, every idea she hatched. I reasoned that it could serve as insurance. She's always 10 steps ahead, though. I gazed at my damaged husband, then at the drive. That's when I made my last move. As Daniel watched, the color fading from his cheeks, I took out my phone and called Agent Roberts. "I have a witness ready to testify, and I have everything you need," I stated into the phone. As I hung up, Daniel's shoulders drooped into his feet. He was aware that it was over. Kate had lost her cover and her companion, but she might have managed to get away with a little cash. Daniel, on the other hand, was going to discover that treason had repercussions, one way or another. The follow happened more quickly than I anticipated. The FBI followed Kate to Miami using Daniel's testimony and the evidence I had collected. where they detained her when she tried to catch a flight to the Cayman Islands. Her victims dated back 6 years, and her accounts were dispersed over 5 states. Daniel was given a reduced sentence in return for his cooperation, 5 years as opposed to 15. I sat silently in the back of the courtroom throughout their sentencing hearings. I experienced a deep feeling of closure as I watched them both being taken away in handcuffs. I didn't feel happy or sad. The victims will receive the money after it has been retrieved, later Agent Roberts told me. The majority of your money should be returned, although it will take time. However, I was already over it. Inspired by my discovery of Kate's scheme, Parker and Ree had elevated me to the position of head of their new fraud detection section. I purchased a modest home in a peaceful area. It wasn't fancy, but this time it was mine. Really mine. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Nina helped me settle into my new place, carefully hanging pictures and arranging furniture. You know what's funny? I said with a chuckle as I opened a bookcase. Daniel used to claim I was too naive, too trusting, but the truth, I had just trusted the wrong people. And now? Nina asked, curiosity flickering in her eyes. I smiled, reflecting on my new colleagues, the countless victims I'd helped, and the life I'd meticulously rebuilt from the ashes. Now I trust myself, and that's enough, I replied with quiet confidence. Later that night, standing alone in my new kitchen, I raised a glass to my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me was wiser, stronger, and finally, completely free. For more inspiring and captivating stories, don't forget to subscribe to the SoraBook channel. Stay tuned for our next videos filled with tales of resilience and transformation.